first question. Tips for people who don't have good feet. I struggle to get over the box and keep my knees straight. So especially in point shoes, if you're a girl, what you want to think about is really lifting up out of the top of the arch and not just like pushing up onto point and sitting in your shoe. You have to really think about lifting up and out of that box, so kind of lengthening the top of the foot a lot rather than just kind of going up and sitting there, if that makes sense. And then really think of lengthening the back of the knee versus just locking the knee back, if that makes sense. You can stretch your feet. I'm not a huge fan of foot stretchers or anything like that. I've had impingement in my ankle, so maybe that's why I'm kind of traumatized by that. But it wasn't from that, it was from something else, but I just don't really like it. But I totally get this because I prefer turning to the right, and my left foot has always been not as easy for me to get over, and then I had the injury on it, so then I had to kind of work back. So you just really have to think of getting up, lifting up out of that shoe and not sitting there, and really stretching the top foot rather than just trying to cram over your toes. Let's see the next question. How to get past the fear of turning. Since I had a bad fall, I chicken out on my turns or end up hopping. This is actually a really good question, and we talk a lot about this in a lot of detail because it's like a 30-minute workshop basically about how to, turn on stage and just getting over the fear. I talk a lot about this consistently throughout the workshop too. Yes, this is the question I'm answering. Good. Maybe you submitted this, Veronica. Let me see. But I think, like anything in ballet, I feel like our mindset is one of the biggest things, and I think that's something that definitely needs to kind of change in the scene of ballet, not only from the dancer side, but whoever you're working with. I know it's just an interesting setup that we deal with in ballet, so you definitely have to have a calm mindset going into it. Whether you're in the studio or you're doing it on stage, it can be scary, especially if you're doing it on point. So just really calm yourself down, build up the strength and the technique so you know that you're able to do it and you're confident in that, because if you kind of have that hesitation going into it, that's where injury occurs. So don't ever hesitate going into anything, and that goes for any step in ballet, really. So you have to kind of have, sorry, letting that truck go by. You kind of have to have that calm mindset, or else it's just going to be like spooky and kind of hit or miss. You don't know if you'll commit to it. So of course having that calm mindset, but then make sure your technique kind of go back to the bar, for example. Go check your supporting leg, check where everything's placed, because if one little thing goes off, then it kind of throws off the whole turn. Commit to it throughout the turn and just try to land. Whenever you're in the studio, just try to commit to that landing. So again, we go way into detail about this in the course too. I could talk about this forever, but I think just really having a calm mindset approach to it and having that confidence, like, okay, I know I can do this single or double pirouette. Just start with singles too and landing those, and then build up. Because that's where it comes from. You don't need to start going into 5 pirouettes right away. That's not what it's about. What are some of the most common mistakes during a pirouette? Honestly, I feel like lack of spotting, and I do this too. Yeah, Veronica, I saw your question. It was kind of similar to this one somebody else asked, so I hope that helped a little bit. Some of the most common mistakes, I feel like we kind of let our spotting go, and I feel like that's where we lose it, honestly. Spotting is kind of talked a lot about when we're younger, but then when we get older, I kind of feel like it's not discussed a lot about, and I do it too. I'll watch my videos back and I'll be like, I am so not spotting at all. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So just kind of keep the spotting in mind. Just commit to the turn as well, so don't let anything shift when you're doing the pirouette. I feel like that's another common thing, is that we let little things go. Is there trying too hard? Yeah, no, there definitely is a case of, especially if let's say you're practicing pirouettes to the right for a really long time. I do this too, and it's just not happening. Sometimes you kind of need to take a step back, either try it to the opposite side or just work on something completely different and then go back to doing those pirouettes. So yeah, don't overthink it. Don't obviously you have to put energy and effort into it, but sometimes we get to a point or a stage in our dancing and training where we don't want to overdo it. We don't want to put too much energy into it, if that makes sense, because then sometimes I can honestly backtrack you a little bit, if that kind of makes sense. But if you're getting frustrated with it or it's just not working, take a break, work on something else, or work on the other side and then come back to it. Okay, next question. Yeah, partying's a whole nother subject. We're kind of thinking about doing something along the lines of that. I want to take private lesson from you, is it possible? Yeah, so I actually am doing kind of one-on-one things as well. So if you go to perfectpirouettes.com, there will be some info about that as well. So, I mean, we could definitely work out like a private lesson online thing. Unless you're in SoCal, maybe we can kind of work on that. But I have a thing where you can send in like a video, 10-minute video of like a either a variation or 1 to 2 specific steps, and then I'll kind of watch that and critique it and kind of help you with that a little bit. So that's kind of a little thing we have right now. Okay, good. Glad it's helping you guys. Let's see, next question. Tips for inside pirouettes. So on day dawn, kind of like the workshop I just posted the tips about. So you can go and watch that preview, and then of course if you want more, you can also just buy single workshops for our perfect pirouettes, or you can buy the whole course. On day dawns, they're honestly really similar to on day or. You're just kind of spinning the opposite way. Biggest tip is watch the turnout in that passe. Don't let that go, because that's gonna kind of cave everything in. You're gonna lose it a little bit, so keep that in mind. We kind of already discussed how to get over the fear of multiple turns on point. Especially on point, just make sure you commit to it and build up to it. Don't try to go for 5 right away. So commit to it, really pull up out of that supporting leg and just know you can land it. Another person asked about inside pirouettes. Just watch your position, make sure everything is really square and even. There's just so much I can talk about, and don't have a lot of time right now, I feel like, but just watch the turnout in that passe, watch it, that's not caving in, and because when that starts to go, that's going to throw off a million other things. And then just watch that everything is staying square, whether your arms are in first or above your head. Just keep that in mind. Where do you spot? Good question. It kind of depends on if you're doing a variation, sometimes you'll spot the back corner of the stage, so like up stage right, for example. I usually prefer to spot the corner versus the mirror in the studio, but this is kind of a thing that depends on whose class you're taking or what your teacher is asking for, so just keep that in mind. But that's another thing, if you're feeling like it's not working spotting the mirror, try switching it to the corner, and sometimes that helps. I don't know why, just spotting the mirror sometimes throws me off. I don't really like it. Same thing with pirouettes from fourth on day or. If spotting the mirror is throwing you off, switch it to spotting the corner. How to not pull off point. So sometimes that happens just because your ankle isn't super stable or strong. So again, especially if you're in point shoes, think of lifting up and out of that shoe and not just pushing up and sinking in the shoe. You have to get on point and then lift up and out of it. Just make sure your ankles are pretty strong. Do a lot of releves and demi-point and point shoes. Making sure your hamstring is super engaged, because that's going to throw it off. And then also going into your core and upper body. If that's weak and not stable, that's also going to affect what your ankle's doing. I mean, your ankle is what's supporting you on point. Make sure when you're pushing up into your point shoes that you're going not all the way towards the big toe, because you don't want to be fully this way. Make sure you're not going towards that pinky toe either. So I like to say towards the first and second toe, because then that usually gets you like right there. So you don't want to be going one way or the other. Kind of already discussed the fear of turning. I mean, we could spend hours talking about that, so I think if you really want help with that, definitely check out our workshop. You can get one workshop for $25. It's just a mental thing that you kind of have to have a calm mindset going into, and definitely make sure you know that you can nail 1 or 2 pirouettes with your technique, making sure everything is nice and placed properly, because when you have that confidence and that muscle memory, then you're going to be able to just turn nice and easy and not have an issue with it. It's fun too, so don't let it scare you. It's actually really fun. I prefer turning on point too, so just have fun with it. Make sure you breathe as well. sure you breathe, because sometimes when we're not breathing, we get really tense and everything just tenses up, and that can throw you off as well. So just kind of watch what you're doing there. It's great. Somebody just rode by on a motorcycle. That's awesome. How to break the habit of the heel coming down. I feel unbalanced, but the heel comes down. Yeah, this makes sense. When you're on dummy point, sometimes we just kind of let the heel come down, even though the rest of the position is totally fine. So that's also just strength, and that's also just pulling up and out of the calf and the back side of the leg. So if you're not engaging the back side of the leg, that's going to throw a lot of things off. So just keep that in mind. Strong core as well. I mean, just because your heel's coming down, it could also be coming from your pelvis or something like that too. Sometimes we let our heel come down just to save the turn a little bit better. It just kind of depends on the situation, honestly, because sometimes we need to put the heel down so we don't totally fall out of it. It just kind of depends on the situation. But I would suggest thinking of working on the back side of the leg, really pulling up out of that calf into the back of the knee, into the hamstring, and then engaging the glutes as well, because if that's loose, that's going to all collapse. Let's see, I have a couple more questions. Hey, how's it going? How do you get out of your head when turning? This is like a super popular question. A lot of people just asking about the fear of turning. Again, if you really want in detail about it, there's like a whole 30-minute workshop regarding it, and I feel like that would just better help you than me kind of trying to quickly discuss it here, and I can't even get into the depth about it. Yeah, you just have to start with your technique and placement about the pirouette, because when you know where to place your body, you're not going to have to worry about that, especially if you're on stage. You're not going to have to worry about that, and that's what the studio is for. Don't worry about messing up in the studio too. I mean, that's totally fine. That's where you're supposed to kind of work on everything and correct things. So if you're kind of having issues in the studio, don't get too hard on yourself, because that's where you're supposed to kind of develop that and work on everything. But yeah, just make sure your technique is nice and solid and everything is placed, so then when you're going to the turns, you know that you are placing yourself correctly. So then it's a matter of just committing to the pirouette and holding the position, and then make sure every time you do the turns you're landing. No matter what happens, as much as possible, try to land. Of course, sometimes you're going to fall out of it, and that's fine, just kind of like I said earlier, but you want to try to land it more times than falling out in the studio. However you land it, whether it's how it was supposed to be landed or if you're landing it another way, you just really want to commit to it, because when you're on stage or in an audition, you have to kind of land it gracefully and as nice as possible. Let's see if we have any more questions. One last question. In your opinion, what are the top 3 most important things to think about in a pirouette? Gosh. The supporting leg, your pelvis, and spotting. But there's a million other things you want to think about too, because those 3 things aren't going to, you have to kind of commit it all together, or else it's just not going to happen. So you have to kind of put a bunch of different things together. It's like you're making a potion or something, because then it's not going to happen if you're doing that. So you just kind of have to think about that as well. So those would be my top 3 things. But again, like we said earlier, you have spotting, you have this and that. So there's a bunch of different things. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just kind of think about working on a few things at once, starting there, and then kind of building up. Maybe one day work on this, then the next day work on that, because it's not going to happen in one day, and that's ballet too. We're always kind of developing it. We're always working on something new. We're always trying to perfect something, even though we'll never be perfect, which is fine. So don't get too hard on yourself about that. So just kind of keep that in mind. Yeah, those were the questions. We had some really good questions. So a lot of people kind of asked the same thing. So that's really interesting and kind of helpful for me to see as well. So I think maybe I'll add a little bit more on that workshop too, because there's so much you can talk about. But I think just have a calm mindset too. Make sure you're having fun with it, because that's what it should be. It should be fun. It shouldn't just be, it's going to be a little tedious, but it should be hard work, but it should also be fun too. You don't want to be torturing yourself too much, right? So you want to enjoy it, especially while most of us are at home right now and kind of just working on progressing on our own and kind of working on our own skills. So yeah. Okay, well, thank you guys for submitting these questions.